You are now listening to Creative Hora.
Hey everyone, welcome to Creative Hora. We're so excited to welcome you to this episode.
Welcome back to us and to audience who are listening. We got some exciting news, but first we want to just do a quick check-in and see how you're doing. So how's everything with you, friend?
I love this question. It's always a very grounding question that brings me back to the present. And I'll say that how I'm feeling right now is, I know we just ended, when we're recording this, ended Leo season, but I'm feeling like a lot of the residual confidence, sunshine, like seeping in from that season. Like it left some little sparkles and I'm like capturing it.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't even realize that Leo season already ended. Felt like it came hard, at least for me, but then, wow, it's
Yes. It went by super quick. But yeah, I'm feeling definitely hopeful for the new season. But how are you feeling, friend? How are you feeling in the present at this moment?
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess at this moment, honestly, I was feeling a little bit ungrounded. I was feeling a bit fatigued earlier today, feeling tired. I don't know if it's all that high energy Leo season that I personally don't really like. No diss to all the Leos and their loyalty. I like that. Like it was just like the season felt like a lot for me. So I think it makes sense now and talking through it why I feel a little bit tired. So it hit me like a bus, and then I'm like feeling the residue of the high energy, I guess, for that season. So yeah, a bit tired.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I hope that, after this conversation, you're feeling a bit more energized and
Yeah,
uplifted.
no, for sure. It's always good to connect with you, and our conversations is always energizing. Yeah, so I think I have no worries about like feeling tired after this conversation.
We are so excited to jump into this topic, friend. And I know you and I have had our own individual conversations about the space that we've created here, but I'm sure you all heard us, welcome you back to Creative Hora, which is something new.
Yeah, definitely. For those that's been listening, us definitely peeped the change in the name. So we want to dedicate this episode to just talking through what that change means for us in terms of branding, the logo, the name, but also it's like individually, like how we perceive that change. We didn't do this just out of the blue. It came with a lot of intentionality, a whole process, lots of iterations, as a lot of our creatives have mentioned in their creative process, that repetition and changing and evolving. So definitely excited to dive into this episode with you.
Yes, I feel the same way, friend. And there's no better way to talk about this than to, throw it back to how we got started with the podcast and talk a little bit about how we first started the idea of a creative space like this podcast. Because for some folks that may not realize that Creator Corner was not actually the original name that we started with. We started on YouTube interviewing folks, creatives, but it was specifically focused around what the creator economy and NFTs, which is a big buzzword at the time. But yeah, friend, how, when you think back to Crypto Corner, what memories does that bring back?
Bro, I mean, I feel like we were just going with the trend, like, ooh, NFTs, ooh, crypto, like, let's hop on that bandwagon, which I think it was a good experience. We did interact a lot with folks who were part of that trend, who were actually making art through NFTs and crypto. So yeah, it's just really funny to me now in retrospect, like thinking that we were called Crypto Corner. But a lot of learnings there, and I mean, for me, it was definitely like exciting. I was like, ooh, we get to talk to creatives related to, again, like what does it mean to have like non-fungible tokens as a creatives? How do you capitalize on that? How do you make sure it's you have that ownership and that intellectual property? So I do think it served its purpose having that name, the Crypto Corner name. And then, I mean, curious to hear your side of it. Then we shortly after evolved to Creator Corner. So what are your first memories of, yeah, like evolving from Crypto Corner to then Creator Corner brand?
Yeah, it this whole journey has been a process of ownership, brand, right? It
Mm-hmm.
feels like that. When we started Crypto Corner back in the day, this was a collaborative project with a close friend of mine
Mm-hmm.
that was focused on launching an NFT community and invited us to participate in that project by learning more about the space, connecting with creatives, and talking about that potential of NFTs to support specifically the creative space.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary and I had no idea what NFTs were. It was all new to us. But the biggest learnings from that experience have definitely been the conversations that we had around digital innovation and
Yep.
technology
Yep.
in the creative space. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm so thankful for that. But when we made the switch from crypto to Creator Corner, that was the first step in our process of,
Mm-hmm.
slowly
Mm-hmm.
trying to move towards more ownership and making this podcast, this space more our own. And so, yeah, we loved expanding and growing with Creator Corner. And
Mm-hmm.
we've learned so much in the process, friend. So I would love to hear from your perspective, what are some of the learnings that we are bringing from Creator Corner into this next evolution with Creative Order?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot that I can mention in terms of learnings, but I think the few things that stuck out to me personally, and would love to hear yours as well, friend, is the thought of like I think when we had Creator Corner, we focused a lot on the everyday creatives and their process. So definitely taking that learning and elevating it by adding our own twist to it in terms of we focus a lot of our conversations on wellness and as it relates to creativity and also some spirituality again, but as it relates to creativity. So I do want to take that learning and even in our last season of Creator Corner, we focus a lot of our creatives that we interviewed brought in the concept of healing and art as an expression, art, their creative project as something that is an outlet for them, whether it's spiritually, whether it's through healing. So definitely want to take that learning into Creative Aura. And I think the other thing I would say for me is one thing I did take away from seasons of Creator Corner was the intentionality behind, for me, it was very important for the name and the look and the brand to align with me. And I think I learned that through the conversations we had with our creatives and also in learning our own creative journeys as creatives as well, is that to me had to be very aligned in how I felt about what we're talking about, how I feel about the guests we're talking to. That translated into, ooh, I create a corner doesn't really align with me anymore. So I'm gonna take this new name and that is more aligned with me, and we could dive in a little bit later. But I think I'll pause there because I definitely want to hear your side of things in terms of learnings from Creator Corner and what that looks like for you.
Yeah, friend. And, I appreciate you sharing that perspective around really bringing that vision for alignment around the brand. Mary and I had conversations as we were
Mm-hmm.
developing Creator Corner about maybe this name doesn't quite fit what we're doing. Um, but we were going through that process of trying to really unpack
Mm-hmm.
what it would even mean switch your name or what it would mean to switch your brand. So it was very early days for us, but the learnings from Creator Corner have been so many. I enjoyed every conversation we had with creators. There's To your point, we had so many wonderful discussions about healing and wellness and the power that creativity and art can have in that healing process as well. But in those conversations, I also started to realize that we were a bit separated from the product. If you looked at our cover art, it was there was no face attached to it. There was no, our personalities weren't infused into the logo. So there was we started to notice that we felt a bit detached from the brand expression. And so that was the first inkling that something needed to change. And that's where we first started to kick off this conversation of we should probably update our brand. We should probably have discussions around the logo and the color scheme. And yeah, so friend, I know that when those conversations changed, you were ready to go. So shit, yeah, I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think just personally, I'm super like an early adopter of change per se, and I'm like, I have this personality of just, yeah, new things. Yeah, new way of looking at things. Ooh, new perspective. And I think I just embrace the uncertainty of change a lot. And I think in going back to just Creator Corner, there was something about like the words that did not resonate with me. And I do think it was playing a creative block for me too, of like, okay, what is our intention for the podcast? What is the podcast? What's our identity of the podcast? And something about those words, specifically the word corner, just felt limiting to me. It felt like, why am I going to be in a corner? Or why does the word corner feel like so secluded when the theme of our podcast and the people we talk to are so inclusive of different perspectives and ideas and the everyday creatives? So I think that alone was why I felt it, like I was ready for that change, like full gung ho on, yes, let's just take everything down and just recreate. So yeah, I think initially it was like that first cue was the word corner did not align with me. The word creator, I didn't think too much of it, but it was just that word corner just felt limiting to me, felt like not as expansive and not as, I guess now in retrospect, like inclusive to like the openness of the space we were trying to create with one another, but also with like audience, with the creatives we're talking to. Um, so yeah, I just felt like for me specifically, it felt like I outgrew the words of Creator Corner and what that meant. Even with the logo of the symmetricalness, I'm like, it doesn't feel as inviting or as warm or like to have those geometric shapes anymore. And don't get me wrong, I love me some geometric looks and aesthetics and things, but something about like the color scheme to the geometric shape of the corners and even and again the word corner didn't fully sit well with me anymore. And lastly, before I hand it off to you, friend, is I we there was no face of like who we are and who we are as people and who we are as two good friends sharing this platform. So I think that's why like I felt so ready for that change. But we'd love to hear your perspective because I know in our conversations and our debriefs, we were, to be quite transparent, like almost in opposite spectrum. So we'd love to hear a little bit more where your thought process were in terms of implementing this change that we're going through right now.
Yeah. Honestly, I was scared. I was scared of the big change, rebranding, changing their name. And a lot of that was unknown. I wasn't sure if we were in alignment around, staying with the creative piece or if that's something that we wanted to move away from. And so the whole concept of, the rebrand, the name change, the logo change, was a bit overwhelming. And even when we began the process, it was honestly like baby steps. We were like, hey, let's just update the logo. We're not going to change the name. We're going to update the logo.
Yeah.
And as we went through updating the logo, that process took months and it took such a long time. And in hindsight, Brian, you mentioned like, you know, I'm thinking back and I'm like, maybe there was a creative block there because it's like we were going into the change only halfway through. Like we're going to change the logo. We're going to change our cover art, our brand, color scheme, but we were still planning to keep the name. And so, yeah, that process was so long. Shout out to our producer that helped us with the various iterations of
Yes.
the cover art. But yeah, we took quite a long time on that, and
Long
we
time.
kept reaching a point of like standstill, where like, oh well, there's still something off. Like it still doesn't look quite right. This is at the point where we had updated the color scheme. So we had already chatted about a color scheme and we're like, okay, this color scheme, we're going to move forward with this. It's a more neutral, soft palette that we want to embrace. But we had this thing, Creator Corner, that in looking at that name with the scheme and the cover art that we were working toward, it just wasn't aligning. The math wasn't mathing.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we really hit a pivotal point, actually only a couple weeks ago, friend, when our producer brought like one of the latest versions, which was supposed to be at this point the final version after various iterations. And we're looking at this final version and still doesn't feel right. And we had to ask ourselves a really like difficult question of, hey, we like what we're seeing with the color scheme. We like what we're seeing with the brand, but does this name fit the overall vision that we have? And yeah, I think that was like the most pivotal point in our conversations about rebranding, changing the name, and really focusing on how to take more ownership of this podcast and make it our own. But yeah, and that was only a couple weeks ago after months and months
I know.
of
Wow, what a
trying to
process.
rebrand.
Yeah, now that we're talking about it, like, yeah, I mean, this is part of, I think, the creative process, right? It's like just iterations after iterations. And sometimes you take that leap of risk or leap of faith, whatever you want to call it, to just be like, let's just roll with this. But I do think after so many months of thinking about it, looking at it, and piecemealing it from color palette to the right picture, to the right style of the picture, to the right font of the title, and then now getting to like the right name for the brand, it does feel like a lot more where we want it to be. And I'm so happy and just ecstatic to share that brand with the audience and the listeners, and also for us, friend, to just feel like it really aligns with both of us and what we want to present in this platform.
Absolutely. Because yeah, once we decided on that name change and we had a conversation about the name change, that was a whole other side quest in that process. But once we decide, hey, like we're gonna change the name, that also sparked other conversations around what that name change would be. And Fred, I know you mentioned something earlier on about Creator Corner feeling very limiting, specifically the word corner in that name. And I remember you and I had a conversation when we were talking about the name change, and it was like, how do you define corner, Mary? And how do you define corner? How do I define corner?
Yeah.
And in that moment, we realized we had totally different definitions for corner.
Right.
Mary talked a little bit about her perspective and the views she had around the word corner. And I shared with her that I had viewed corner as a space for dedicated time for creativity. And for me, that corner felt like it was was a separate space, but it was a separate space that was, like I said, specifically dedicated for this creative process,
Mhm.
Dedicated for the podcast and dedicated
Mhm.
for this time. With the corner, it didn't feel limiting to me because it felt like I said, like it was like a space that was dedicated to
Mhm.
enjoying time with my friend and being creative with my friend outside of, some of my like my day-to-day job. So it is interesting that when we chatted about that, we had those different definitions, but even in
Mhm.
explaining my own definition of corner, Mary, we were able to unpack that more and unpack that more. And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
we're like, what about, what about keeping the word creativity in some sort of
Yes.
fashion with
Yeah.
creative, but really changing this corner space into something that is a little bit more of a dedicated time to creativity, such as
Mhm.
Hora. But I
Mhm.
want to,
Mhm.
Fran, I want to give you the space as well to talk about the word Hora because Hora was something that I viewed as, again, we're going to have this dedicated hour, which is what hora means in English for those that don't speak Spanish, to really dedicate to this craft, to this space that we're creating. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, Fran, I know that you had some other thoughts about this specific word.
Yeah, so yeah, I remember that conversation of how they just really quickly going back to like the word corner, and that was pretty mind-boggling how opposite we thought about that word. But it was also, I think, for me, a beautiful process to come together and be like, wow, we really thought about that differently. And then come to a creative agreement to be like, yeah, maybe since we're both on just a different page with that, like we felt comfortable, like, okay, maybe we're not so attached with that word, or we can forgo that word for now. But yeah, like the evolution of like the word ora, I felt like really stood out to me because at first I knew we threw the I threw a word around. I threw the word aura there, kind of like aura. But I also didn't want to kind of taint like our podcast thinking that we're talking about solely like spiritual beings or giving spiritual advice because that's definitely not the vibe I wanted to go. But there was something about the word aura, like the more so the yeah, like it just had a nice ring to it to me. But again, when we were discussing, like, well, that's not the intent and the theme of our podcast. Like, we're not talking about auras all the time. We still need to have like the creativity part of it. And then I think I like the word hora, which is like you said, like time in Spanish, because I was like, well, let's just. It still has the word aura there, but it's not. Again, like it's very intentional. We're not here again. I just want to repeat that over because we're not here to just talk about solely like spirituality aura. But I do like that it's up for the listeners, the creatives' interpretation. If you are more Spanish speaking, it will maybe click quicker to be like, oh, hora is like time. But if as a non-Spanish speaker, it's up for interpretation. Like hora, aura, like what does that mean? And hopefully I think part of our identity for the podcast is that curiosity too. And hopefully a lot of listeners get like that curious bone of like, what is that? Like, what is horror? What is aura? So I think that's the angle took the word in, where initially like, again, like something about the word like really stood out to me, and the fact that it was ambiguous enough, but also so intentional enough where your perspective is coming in terms of that dedicated time. I felt like we could combine our two desires of having that dedicated time, but also being up for interpretation and expansive in a way. So I think that's what it meant for me, like to come up with this word "ora," and we were able to combine kind of our both of our visions to this new rebranding and new name for us.
Yeah, friend, I definitely agree that the conversation on the name change, I was expecting to be like a lot harder than it was, to be honest. Yeah, I think we took the moment to hear each other out, and I do feel like,
Mhm.
yeah, we walked away with that conversation with an idea of where we wanted to go and the name coming to fruition. So
Mhm.
as we are taking ownership of Creative Hora and really moving forward and building, continuing to build this space with you, my friend, I'm curious, what are you most excited to talk about and, bring
Mhm.
forth into Creative Hora?
Yeah, and I like this question because it puts me like in a reflective state where it's like, ooh, like what does this mean to me now with a new name, with a new brand, or what does it mean for us as two friends
Yeah.
having a platform? So a couple of things that I'm bringing or I want to bring to Creative Aura now is definitely that refreshed and revived energy of like, this is our podcast. There's no more ties to our origin stories. And don't get me wrong, super appreciative of where it led us now because without that origin story, we wouldn't be here. But I'm excited for just continuing the community we've built with the creatives we've talked to, but also the space we've put for one another as creatives as well and going through our creative journey and that iterative process. So definitely lots of refresh, vibrant energy. And yeah, like full ownership comes to mind in terms of the themes for Creative Aura. And then I do think there's like a lot of what we did with Creator Corner, like the essence is still going to be there in Creative Aura, but it's
Yeah.
just elevating it, it's just evolving it. Because for me, like we will still have guests with creatives and learning about their process, learning about how they sustain themselves wellness wise through their creative process. And then, yeah, like keeping the same essence of like, this is a platform for two friends to be chatting about creativity, whether it's our own creativity, whether it's our own creative process, that life work like project
Yeah.
that we're doing. So I think that's what I want to bring to the rebranding of To Creative Aura, friend. But curious to hear what strikes out to you in terms of when you think about this new evolution to Creative Aura. What does that look like for you? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, Fran, thank you for the question. And yeah, I am really excited about the just continuing to build Creative Hora with you because we've only scratched the surface with the conversations we've had with creators. And I think this is an opportunity for us to dive deeper, not just into the creators, creative process and the work that they're doing and the iterations that they go through as well, but also really focus on that, self-care piece that comes with creativity.
Yeah. Yeah.
We as creators, we still have to take care of ourselves. We still have to fill our cup as we are channeling into our art and our creativity. And so that's something that I'm really excited about exploring. To
Mhm.
your point, going deeper with creators and having conversations around wellness and having conversations and teachings that I could also learn and implement into my day to day,
Mhm.
into my own creative journey, my own wellness journey as well. So I'm really excited about that potential, friend. And
Mhm.
with that, also being more open to sharing our stories. You brought
Mhm.
up the concept of, you know, our own life project.
Mhm.
Yeah, this life is my creative project. And I'm really excited about sharing that with the podcast and, you know, friend, also creating the space of that we've, in our friendship, really continue to share that friendship with the audience and
Mhm.
inviting others to also, join us in those conversations. So, yeah, friend, it's a very beautiful and exciting new chapter. Open that page to Creative Aura and
And
continue to build on the space.
yeah, definitely an exciting chapter. Definitely a lot of uncertainties as well. But I do think combining both of our perspectives and intentionality and different creative outlooks in the process and in this platform is what will get us towards that bigger vision of really having this platform for creatives out there and for ourselves to to share their journeys as they create and find things to express their way through creativity. So I am super excited to launch Creative Aura, and I think as we're transitioning, so I think I'm curious about like what I mean, it goes into our bonfire moment now, but curious to hear kind of the things that you're releasing out there in general. It could be about the platform, it could be about anything that we've just discussed.
Yeah, friend. Something that I'm looking to release into the bonfire as we're moving into this new chapter will definitely be, just that fear of the unknown, which is a little scary, but I feel like once I really embrace that in our conversations, just seeing how quickly things came together, just brought me a lot of hope. And so I'm excited about, I know there is obviously uncertainty and stuff, but we've recorded a few episodes, friend, and I feel so confident that we are moving in the right direction. So yeah, just releasing any lingering doubts about the change is what I am throwing into the bonfire today. So what about you?
Yeah, I've thought about this in terms of what I'm releasing, and I do think I'm releasing the old kind of ties we had with the podcast to really bring in that new fresh energy that comes from us. So we're definitely releasing and being super grateful again for what Creative Corner was, and at the time when it felt aligned at the time. So I think just releasing that old ties and patterns of Creative Corner and taking it to the next level where it's fully our voice, fully our creative process, fully our space. So I think that's what I'm releasing out there.
I love that, friend. Thank you so much.
No, definitely. But so super excited to share with you all. And again, stay tuned for the rebrand.
Thanks for tuning in. Creative Hora is a podcast production hosted by Dalia Zaragoza and Mary Figueroa. This episode is edited by Abdullah Kawish and is produced by akstudio.global.